Okay, you can go to the next slide. So we want to talk about SBA's assistance that's available to all survivors of a disaster. So we start with a physical disaster. And with the physical disaster loans, we're able to provide financing, long-term financing to assist in the businesses in repairing or replacing their disaster damaged property. And that would include real estate, replacing inventories and supplies, machinery, and equipment. And that means that businesses of any size are eligible to submit applications, as well as private and nonprofit organizations such as charities, churches, private universities. Those also are eligible. And for those who are suffering economic injury, where they're suffering from economic losses. They're not able to reopen their doors right away, so there's no income coming in. We have the economic injury disaster loan, and we refer to it as EIDL. And these are working capital loans that are provided to small businesses, small agricultural co-ops, and small businesses engaged in aquaculture. And most private nonprofit organizations of all sizes are able to apply for an EIDL. And these loans are intended to assist through the disaster recovery period. Now, as I mentioned, these are working capital loans, which means they're generally intended to provide you for up to 6 months of working capital to meet your immediate working capital needs, like paying your monthly expenses or your rent or leases for the small business, or you may have a mortgage on the building where the small business is held. As long as it's something directly related to the business, you're able to use those proceeds for that. You cannot use the proceeds to enter into new debt or for construction or to purchase equipment. Now, for our homeowners, we also provide disaster loans for the homeowners. And these loans are intended to repair or replace your personal residence, your personal property, including automobiles. So say, for instance, your home may have been spared damage, but a tree may have fallen on your automobile. Then you would be able to get a disaster home loan to meet that need to replace or repair your automobile. There's also funding available for flood mitigation and wind mitigation. So you may need to have your home elevated or have some storm windows or doors installed on your residence. Then you can use the SBA disaster loan assistance for that. Next slide, please. So how much can you borrow? If you are a business, then you're eligible to apply for up to $2 million to repair or replace real estate inventories, machinery, equipment, and other physical losses. Now, it is subject to a maximum loan amount that cannot exceed the verified uninsured disaster loss. So those loans are there to assist you in covering those expenses and losses that are not covered by your insurance. There's also a maximum for economic injury or EIDL of $2 million. And again, that's to help you weather your way through your being able to reopen your business. For the ceiling for businesses, the maximum is $2 million overall to any one business. And for home loans, the maximum is $200,000. And of course, that's to repair or replace real estate. And if it's for personal property, the maximum is $40,000. And again, all of this is subject to whatever is not covered by your insurance. Next slide, please. These are generally low interest loans. So if it's a home loan, the current interest rate is 1.188% for 30 years. If it's a business loan, it's 3% for 30 years. And for nonprofit organizations, it's 2 3/4%. For the economic injury loans for the businesses, it's 3%. And for nonprofit organizations, it's 2 3/4%. Next slide, please.
What button to press?
So we do require collateral on the loan if it's over $25,000. However, SBA will not decline a loan solely for lack of collateral. If real estate is available and we're using the loan, you're using the loan to repair or replace real estate, we will request a mortgage on that real estate. So even though we will not decline a loan solely for lack of collateral, we do require that the borrowers pledge whatever collateral is available. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, these are 30-year low interest loans that are made directly from SBA through the Treasury. So the Treasury provides the funds to us, and we in turn make those loans available to you. You will not be dealing with a lender or other bank or credit union for the disaster loans. There is no cost or fee to apply. And if you're approved for the loan, you're not obligated to take it. And you will have 60 days to accept the loan amount offered. And you can have an existing SBA disaster loan or other loans and still qualify for another disaster loan for a most recent disaster. The only thing is you cannot combine the loans that you have, nor can you use a new loan to pay off an existing loan. Next slide, please. So there are some restrictions on eligibility, and that means that our loans are only intended to cover your uninsured losses. Now, in some cases, like what we experienced with Hurricane Katrina, the cost of the materials went up. So where that maximum loan for the home was $200,000, we were able to make some loans above that amount because the survivor was able to provide evidence to show that the cost of the materials had gone up. There are some ineligible properties that would not be eligible for SBA disaster loan. That would include secondary homes, personal pleasure boats, airplanes, recreational vehicles, and similar property are not eligible unless they're used for business purposes. Properties such as antiques and collections are eligible only to the extent of their functional value. And we recognize that for some properties, there's a significant amount of landscaping costs that may be associated. So if you have those types of costs and losses that are not covered by the insurance, just know that for landscaping and swimming pools, it will be what we're able to loan to you would be limited. If you have an existing loan and you've not complied with the terms and conditions of a previous loan, you would not be eligible. And that means that if you had an SBA disaster loan and we required you to maintain flood insurance or wind and hazard insurance and you did not maintain it on that previous loan, we would not be able to make a new loan to you. Next slide, please. So there is assistance that's available from our resource partners. Of course, we have our Louisiana Small Business Development Centers, our SCORE counselors to America's Small Business. Assistance is also available from our Veterans Business Outreach Centers and our Women's Business Resource Centers. And that assistance is available to you at no cost. So you're able to reach out to any of those resource partners. Next slide, please. So whenever there's a disaster, we encourage you to submit your application as quickly as possible. Now, because FEMA offers some assistance. One of the requirements for the individuals would be that you register with FEMA, because on your SBA disaster application, you would be required to include your FEMA registration number if you're applying for personal assistance or if you're applying for assistance for your home. However, if you're only applying for assistance for a business, it's not necessary to register with FEMA, because FEMA doesn't necessarily provide assistance to businesses. If for some reason your loan is denied, you will have up to 6 months in which to provide information to overcome those reasons for denial. So we'll be specific in why we were not able to make the loan to you, and you would want to address those reasons for denial in your reconsideration request. Next slide, please. Next slide. So I want to talk to you about what's available now to you if you are a business and you're suffering because of the pandemic. Of course, we know that we have the Paycheck Protection Program, and we've extended the application period for the PPP to May 31st, 2021. We also recognize that there were sole proprietors, independent contractors, and self-employed individuals that were not able to get support, either because their Schedule C, line 31, reflected a net loss or no income, or it may have reflected a minimal net profit. And because the amount of a PPP loan was based upon the amount on line 31 for the Schedule C filers, under the Biden-Harris administration, some new reforms went into effect, and they were effective February 24, 2021. And what those new reforms allow is for Schedule C filers to be able to use their gross income from line 7 to determine the amount of their loan, because we recognize that there were ongoing expenses that our Schedule C filers had to pay, even though they showed a net loss. So this is going to allow those sole proprietors, independent contractors, and self-employed individuals to apply for more financial support. There were also exclusions for business owners who had prior non-fraud felony convictions. So we've eliminated that exclusion. So if you're a business owner and you have a non-fraud felony conviction, you can now apply for and be eligible for a PPP. We also have small business owners who had student loans and they had become delinquent on their federal student loan debt. That exclusion has been removed, and you're now able to apply for a PPP loan. And we have non-citizens who are lawful US residents, and they're making a significant contribution to the economy. They're paying taxes. If they have an individual tax identification number that is current, then they're able to apply for a PPP. Now, I mentioned that I-10, that individual tax identification number, must be current, because those lawful US residents with that I-10 are required to file taxes at a minimum every 3 years, and their I-10 expires if they do not. So if they have a current I-10, they are eligible to apply for PPP. Next slide, please. We broadened the uses of the PPP funds. Originally, under the PPP program, the loans could only be used to make payroll, to pay mortgage interest payments, and to meet utility costs. Now we've expanded that because in this environment in which we're working, where we're teleworking, and a lot of individuals had to move to working from home, the business owners incurred some additional operations expenditures. They may have had to invest in additional software or incurred cloud computing costs. And they may have also had to enlist the services of a payroll company to track their employees' payroll. Those are now covered forgivable expenses under the PPP loan. Also, if you suffered damage as a result of civil unrest in 2020, and those damages are not covered by insurance, you can now use the PPP funds to take care of those damages, and recognizing that supplier costs went up for delivery of materials that were essential to the borrower's business. Those are now covered costs. Next slide, please. One of the biggest questions we would always get on the PPP-1 was if personal protective equipment was eligible for using the proceeds from a PPP loan. And unfortunately, on the PPP-1, they were not. Now, if you invest in PPE rather, personal protective equipment for your employees, if you invest in capital expenditures like constructing or including sneeze guards, or if you were a business that had to add a drive-through window to provide delivery or to invest in social distancing practices for your business, those are now covered expenses. And also, we've clarified health benefits includes dental, vision, and disability insurance. And if you are an employer and you pay the life insurance premiums without making a deduction from your employee's check, that's now an eligible payroll expense. Next slide, please. There are some newly eligible entities, and these are covered under the IRS code 501c6. And these are generally organizations where you charge a fee to join them. And that would include business leagues, chambers of commerce, real estate boards, and boards of trades. However, it excludes professional sports leagues and organizations, as well as those that are engaged in political activities. For those entities to be eligible, they may not have more than 300 employees, and they may not receive more than 15% of its receipts from lobbying activities. Likewise, those lobbying activities may not comprise more than 15% of their total activities, and the cost of those activities may not exceed $1 million. Next slide, please. Housing co-ops are now eligible, as well as destination marketing organizations that provide venues for conferences and entity and other conventions like that. They're not eligible. They still would be subject to the limitation on employees and those 15% that 15% limitation for lobbying activities and the amount that they receive from lobbying activities. Next slide, please. Some news organizations are now eligible, and generally these would be organizations under NAICS code 511110 or 5151. Now, they would be subject to a limitation of 500 employees or less, and if they have multiple locations, no more than 500 employees at any one location. Next slide, please. Next slide. So these are what's remaining the same. We're still offering The PPP loan, the only difference is that there are additional uses of proceeds that are allowable, and we have extended the period to apply to May 31st, 2021. However, if you're looking to apply for a PPP, we're encouraging you to do that right away because some of the lenders will stop accepting applications around the middle of May. We're still able to provide debt relief to our 7A borrowers, our 504 certified development company loan borrowers, and our microloans. And what that debt relief means is that SBA is making the monthly payments to the lenders. And there's nothing that the borrowers need to do. The lenders will take care of that. With the economic injury disaster loan, we still have those available for the pandemic, and the period to apply for the EIDL has been extended to December 31st, 2021. And the targeted EIDL advance, we've been given funds that allow us to go back to those borrowers or applicants who submitted an EIDL application by December 26, 2020, and either they did not receive the full amount of that EIDL advance, which was $10,000. So for instance, now they're able to apply for the difference. So the maximum was $10,000. They may have only received $2,000. Now, once they get their invitation from SBA, they can go back and apply for the difference of $8,000. And the shuttered venue operators grant, unfortunately, that application period is not open yet. We opened the portal on April 8th, but because of technical difficulties, we had to shut it back down again. So as soon as we're able to open that portal, we'll get information out to the general public. Next slide, please. So some key takeaways from PPP: you have between 8 weeks and 24 weeks to use those funds. You're also eligible for a second draw PPP loan if you suffered at least a 25% decrease in your total revenues. So you get to choose which quarter you're going to use in 2019 to compare to that same quarter in 2020 to support that you suffered at least a 25% loss in your revenues. And if you receive your first draw loan, say like in January or February, if you've used your funds over a minimum of 8 weeks, then you're able to go back and apply for a second draw loan. IRS also updated its standards, and IRS is now allowing you to deduct any expenses that you paid with your PPP loan on your taxes. We have a simplified application for loans up to $150,000 in requesting forgiveness. And this is a biggie, no longer will we subtract your EIDL advance from your PPP loan forgiveness amount. Next slide, please. So we've talked about the first draw, and the first draw is basically anyone who did not get a loan by August 9th, 2020. You're eligible to apply for a first draw loan as long as your business was in operation as of February 15, 2020. Next slide, please. And the second draw loan, to be eligible, you must be able to demonstrate that 25% reduction in gross receipts between 2019 and 2020 over comparable quarters, which means if you use that first quarter, January, February, and March of 2019, you must compare it to that same quarter in 2020. And if you are in the accommodation and food service industry under NAICS code Major Group 7-2, then you can apply for a second draw loan, and your second draw loan will be based upon 3.5 times your average monthly 2019 or 2020 payroll costs up to a maximum of $2 million. And for your second draw loan, you want to make sure that you're submitting the application on the SBA form 2483SD. Next slide, please. So we've talked about the second draw loan. I've already covered this, so we can go to the next slide. Some additional takeaways to remember is that your PPP loan is not taxable if it's forgiven. And something else IRS has put in place is that you can still claim the employee retention tax credit, provided that it meets the IRS standards. But you have to remember that you cannot claim the wages paid with a forgiven PPP loan under that employee retention tax credit. You must continue to pay the employees, even though you may have been shut down temporarily or you suffered a 20% drop in your receipts. And this credit is good on qualified wages paid up to July 1st, 2021. Now, this is an IRS standard, not SBA. Next slide, please. And we've talked about the EIDL for regular disaster loans. Just so you'll know, EIDL is still available to you. Next slide, please, for COVID-19. And we've talked about the targeted EIDL. To be eligible for that, you must be in a low-income community as defined by IRS standards. You must be able to demonstrate that you suffered a greater than 30% economic loss, and you must have 300 or fewer employees. Now, with this being targeted EIDL advance, that means that you will receive an email from SBA inviting you to submit an application for the targeted EIDL advance. Next slide, please. And this is just an idea of the information you'll need to submit. So you want to have your 2019 federal tax return ready, okay? You must have already filed your 2019 tax returns, and you will be required to submit the SBA form 4506, not SBA, it's an IRS form 4506T, so that SBA can pull your tax transcript. Before submitting your application for the targeted EIDL advance, please check the IRS website to make sure that your 2019 tax transcript is visible, because the processor of your targeted EIDL advance will need to take a look at that. Next slide, please. So for the shuttered venues operators grant, now when I put this presentation together, the portal was scheduled to open on April 8th. It did, but we had to shut it back down. However, if you are a shuttered venue that would qualify for the shuttered venues operators grant, meaning that you're a live venue operator or promoter, theatrical producers, live performing arts organization, or motion picture theater, museum operators, talent reps, then you have to have an active registration in SAM. Also, you can, even though the portal to submit the application is closed, you can go in and set up your account so that when we open the portal, you can go on and start submitting your application. So to be eligible for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, you must have been in operation as of February 29, 2020. And if you have received a PPP loan after December 27, 2020, the PPP loan will be deducted from your Shuttered Venues Operators Grant. Next slide, please. I mentioned that we're making the payments on SBA loans that we guarantee, and also our micro borrowers. You must have been current on your loan in order for us to be able to make your payments. Next slide, please. And just the next slide just covers some things to consider when, you know, we're in you're recovering. And so you want to look at, you know, basically having a plan in place to recover from the disaster. We want you to take advantage of all of the funding options that's available from SBA for COVID, but also, you know, if it's a disaster that's not related to COVID. Next slide, please. On our Ascent website, there are some journeys that you can take at no cost. And these journeys allow you to look at opportunities where you can pivot your business, streamline your business. You also want to look at whether or not there's an opportunity to negotiate if you're leasing any of your lease, negotiate your leases, and look at what you can do to improve your cybersecurity and your workplace safety. Next slide, please. So this is the page for our Ascent platform. And of course, this was originally set up for women business owners, but Ascent is open to all individuals who would like to take advantage of it. Next slide, please. And that's what the page looks like. So like Journey 1 actually deals with disaster and economic recovery. There, Journey 2, strategic marketing. Journey 3, managing your people. And 4 and 5 deals with what you need to do to position yourself to get financing and what you need to do to apply for the loan. So with looking at disaster and economic recovery, there's a journey that allows you to explore the impact of a disaster, provide you some recovery strategies, and some tips on supporting your people. Next slide, please. We want you to stay connected to SBA. You can sign up for SBA updates. All we ask of you is your email address and your zip code. You can also follow us on Twitter, and to contact the district office, our main number is 504-589-6685, and we have 3 staff members who manage that number. So you'll get a call back the same day or within 24 hours. One thing that's not included as a part of this presentation, because we're still working on launching it, if we have any restaurant owners, is the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. We expect to be launching the portal for that on April 26th. And this is funding that you will be able to apply for directly from SBA. You will not be working with a lender. And if the proceeds are used for approved purposes, you won't have to pay the funds back or return any of the funds to us. Next slide, please. So this is just the page where you can go to apply for the SBA, to sign up for the SBA updates and receive our newsletter. Next slide, please. This is my contact information. Generally, the easiest way to get me is via email, joe.lawrence3@sba.gov. My office line, 504-589-2879. And even though we are teleworking, that number rings on my computer, and also it rings on my cell phone. And my direct cell number is 504-256-5293. But don't forget that you can also call our office line, 504-589-6685. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'll take any questions that we may have.